Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Development. Agenda item 1 is the evacuation procedure. For those who don't know it, the emergency exit is just that door there. We're not expecting the alarm to sound, so if it does, it won't be a test. So please leave the building by the nearest safest exit, which is almost certain to be that door there, if not the front door that you entered the building on. And please go to assembly point G in the car park, which is just outside the windows, and stay there until Mr. Tobin, tonight's officer, says that it's safe to do otherwise. Please just don't go home because the fire brigade might be searching for a burning building looking for it. Agenda item number 2 is the apologies for absence for members on official council business or otherwise away. Mr. Tobin.
Chair, Councillor Moss is still unwell, so his apologies are sent. We've not heard from other members, but we do know that Councillor Clues is on holiday at the moment.
Councillor Wilson?
Councillor Mawson was hoping to attend, but is on one.
James, are you happy to note those?
No, yes.
Can we send our best wishes to Councillor Mawson for a speedy recovery? Does anyone have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest they wish to draw to the board's attention?
I have, Chair. It's the Merivale Lane. I sit on the regulatory board for the county. The decisions will be made by them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park?
Item 6F, the Colesworth Club. I have been involved in the consultation exercises which have been undertaken. I have been there to listen and to sort of assist where I can, but I haven't expressed opinions either way. So I just wanted to declare the fact that I have been involved in that consultation process. That's as far as it's gone.
Thanks, Rob.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock?
The same as what David just said. I've been involved as well, but again, I haven't expressed an opinion either side.
Thank you very much. So we'll note all of that. Members, I'd like to vary the agenda for tonight's meeting, if you don't mind, because we have a number of people in the public gallery who I think are largely here to talk about application for 395, the land at the southern end of Willow Close.
Can I page number, please, Chair?
Page 71.
So, members, are you happy for us to bring that agenda item forward? So,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker, Mr. Simon Gilbert. If you'd like to take the speaker's chair, Mr. Gilbert, whilst Mr. Brown introduces his review.
Item 4.
I'll catch up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just get through to the slides for Artsel. Right. The proposal, Mr. Chairman, the major part of the proposal actually is in Nuneaton. The application site there is outlined in red. Willow Close is the small cul-de-sac, which you can see here, and Lillibone Close is the road along here on the northern boundary. The Plough Hill Road is here with the junction just off the plan. In terms of an illustration, the applicant has provided that. Again, it's a bit clearer in terms of its connection to Willow Close, which is here, and the junction with the Plough Hill Road here, and the junction with Colesworth Road is just off the plan. As you can see, it's a cul-de-sac with 29 properties there. The reason why we're considering the application is because part of the application site is effectively off of the turning head here of Willow Close, in this area here. A small part of the actual access road into the site below is within North Warwickshire. And so therefore we've got the application for this piece of land, which will effectively enable access into the proposed development. There are car parking spaces already in Willow Close, as outlined in the board report. There's a lay-by here, and there are also parking spaces here. You'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that the consultations with the Highway Authority have led to the Highway Authority indicating changes to the parking arrangements such that the echelon parking here would in fact be parallel parking, which would reduce the number of car parking spaces. Spaces here would not be altered. To compensate, the Highway Authority is saying that there should be 2 spaces at the other end of the turning head, as you can see here, outside one of the bungalows which are here. And also, the alignment of this particular curve would also be altered to ensure that vehicles, that if planning permission is granted, that vehicles see that as the main route through and do not cause congestion in this particular part of the site. As I said, there's a reduction in car parking spaces, even with these 2 here. The proposals are to increase the number of parking spaces on this side of the access road, actually in the Nuneaton area, as you can see by the 2 purple blocks there. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the actual proposal that we have in front of us. It's the enablement of access into the site. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, the main concern here is the impact of this proposal on North Warwickshire residents, and particularly the residents in Willow Close, which the report indicates is totally a development for old age pensioners and bungalows. It's council managed, and it's specifically for that particular section of the community. There will be an impact on that community, both in terms of the amount of traffic that's going to be it will increase. The pedestrian activity will certainly increase, and there will be a difficulty in actually finding parking spaces beyond those which are already outlined there. The report, Mr. Chairman, does outline in this particular case that the council does have a duty under the Public Sector Equality Act, because the impacts here will be affecting a particular group and the whole of a particular group, as I've outlined, and that carries or gives extra weight that we consider there to be in terms of the harm caused to residential amenity of those residents. And the recommendation, as you can see, Mr. Chairman, is refusing. I need to add that the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council have granted the Planning Commission for the 29 houses in Nuneaton, but that's subject to a Section 106 agreement, which refers to improvements at the Plowhill Road and Coathall Road junction, which have not yet been agreed. So even though a planning permission has been granted, that cannot be implemented until such time as that particular 106 has been signed. And in any event, Mr. Chairman, it cannot be implemented if there is a refusal here tonight on that part of the access road in North Warwickshire. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Gilbert, welcome to the Council House.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin will explain the rules to you for public speaking, so
Yes.
I'll hand over to him. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll tell you when that 3 minutes starts, and then I'll tell you when there's 1 minute remaining. And then if you're still speaking at the end, I'll tell you when your time's up. Okay. And there is a microphone in front of you. If you press the button, I don't know if you switch it on. Yes. Okay. So, yeah. All right, your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay. Firstly, the residents would like to thank Andrew Collinson and Margaret Bell for attending the meeting at Willow Close to air their concerns. The residents strongly oppose this application for the access from Willow Close into the proposed development of 29 properties at the southern end of Willow Close. There are many issues they wish to address. Willow Close was developed by North Warwickshire Borough Council as a cul-de-sac of purpose-built bungalows, mainly for elderly residents, which are expected to be their last homes. They should be able to live here peacefully and in the latter stages of life without stress and worries. Many of the residents have poor health and disabilities and should not have to endure further stress this proposed development has already caused. Many of the residents have carer visits 3 times per day, which is extra traffic into the close. Also, emergency vehicles can be a daily occurrence, and only last week an ambulance was parked for 2.5 hours outside for a resident, which completely blocked any access to anyone in or out of the close. The existing parking bays have been used by non-residents for many years, and of recent, the close is being used as a pick-up area for the local school, causing great nuisance and congestion. We understand, however, this is being monitored. The proposal for creating further parking spaces further away from residents' homes is completely unacceptable due to mobility issues. Construction traffic for a new development will cause massive issues for the already vulnerable residents with noise and air pollution, and will be unsafe for many of them to go outside their homes, as they may have existing respiratory issues which may be aggravated.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Junction of Willow Close flows onto Plough Hill Road, then onto Coleshill Road, and this has already been demonstrated as overcapacity by the Artshill transport study, so adding extra traffic to this area will worsen the issue. Currently, traffic on the Plough Hill Road and Coleshill Road junction already cause a great issue with accessing in and out of Willow Close without further construction and associated vehicles, again creating further noise and pollution and safety issues to the residents. Another 29 properties that would be using access through Willow Close would be completely unacceptable. This would cause far too much through traffic gain, causing nuisance, pollution and safety to the residents. There will also be associated traffic deliveries, etc., adding to the burden. The residents that would back onto the proposed development.
This is your time now.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Gilbert? Councillor Jordan?
You were just about, I mean, the time got cut off there. But what was you saying about the residents that back onto this area?
Well, obviously, some of them have relatively small gardens, so the privacy issues that they would have, the privacy's gone completely.
Right. And parking is really a big
Parking
issue.
is a massive issue. I mean, it's pretty much virtually all non-residents who park there. I mean, any visitors or people wanting to, who with a need to visit people for health issues, etc., etc. It's a big struggle. The parking now, it shows the parallel parking. That was how it was originally set up. It was only the non-residents that started parking sideways to get more vehicles in. That is pretty much how it was set up originally, that lay-by. But the parking is a massive issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Can I just ask approximately how many of the bungalows their gardens would actually respond to this development if it were to happen? You know how many there are?
It's running down to the far corner, but I would imagine somewhere in the 6 to 8 region on the back and a couple on the side.
Yeah.
So 8 to 10 altogether, I would imagine.
Thank you.
No more questions? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, back to Councillor Bell.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yes, and I mean, the speaker there did cover most of the points, but I just wanted to emphasise some things. This has been designed as a quiet cul-de-sac, Willow Close, for our elderly residents. We have very few of these places in North Warwickshire. We need to preserve the ones that we've got. And there's no doubt in my mind that the impact of this proposed development would be very severe on this cul-de-sac. Not only have we got the protected characteristics of these people being elderly, many of them have got health issues, particularly respiratory issues, and the increase in traffic and the pollution will have a significant effect on them. And one of the reasons, another reason for saying that is, we've already talked about the congestion of the traffic and how difficult it is. If you don't know the area, it's difficult to explain. But the Plough Hill Road, Coleshill Road junction is always congested. This junction of Willow Close with Plough Hill Road is very close to that junction. So you can't get out of Willow Close. So there's going to be queuing traffic in Willow Close trying to get out with their engines running. This is going to be even worse than just passing traffic as we would normally expect it. I am dismayed, I have to say, by Highways' response to this. The Hartshill Transport Study showed conclusively that the Plough Hill Road junction is over congested already and cannot take any more traffic. And we're talking about another 29 houses, which is, I don't know how many cars, but it's going to be many more than 29 cars going in and out of there. This is, in my view, the impact on the community is going to be severe. So I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation of refusal for this application. And you, in the refusal, you'll see the planning reasons. I won't repeat them. Mr. Brown has set them out there. So I propose refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis?
Second it, but
Councillor Goff?
I have had the pleasure of sitting on a Labour Party table in Willow Close, which we had to carry there because we couldn't park, and had the pleasure of sitting there enjoying what is a really little haven, as you say, on an absolute night road junction. There's so much heavy traffic going past on the front, and the Plough Hill junction is a night road. This is completely inappropriate and doesn't suit those. And I think it is a brilliant facility for those residents that live there. We've already heard about ambulances and emergency vehicles, and overloading that junction anymore, I think, would be severely detrimental. So, fully support the refusal.
Thank you. Any other members? Just a technical question, Mr. Brown. I noted in their response to you, the County Council, as the highways agency, had no objection, but did require a Section 106 agreement. Were we able to, I mean, I'm fascinated that they requested 106, but say the sum of 4 X's. Did they quantify that?
It's not been quantified yet, Mr. Chairman. That's the reason why, even though the Nuneaton Bedford Borough Council intend to grant a planning permission, the date when that planning permission is signed is not known.
Okay, I'm just sort of conscious that if they appeal, we'll need to develop a fallback position.
Well, there are 2 applications here, Mr. Chairman, one in Nuneaton and one in the borough. If this is refused and they appeal, then the appeal will just relate to our particular part of the whole development, not to Nuneaton, although that is a material consideration. And the inspector who deals with it will have to balance the 2 issues.
Yeah. Okay. If that were to be the case, would there need to be 2 106 agreements, one for Nuneaton and one for our applications?
Not in that particular case, Mr. Chairman, because the 106 relates to land in North Warwickshire, which of course it can do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other questions? So this application has been proposed and seconded for refusal. Can I see those in favour of refusing consent? And that's unanimous. So planning consent is refused. We'll wait a few minutes if any members of the public wish to leave. That's fine. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But if you'd rather go home and do other stuff, then we absolutely understand.
So if you have enough more.
So, members, we'll go back to the printed agenda. Agenda item number 4 is minutes of the board held on the 6th of February. Those in favour? Agenda item number 5 is the planning enforcement plan. Those of you I'm sorry, I can hardly hear myself speak. Those of you with good eyesight might have noticed we have 2 gentlemen sitting next to Mr. Brown. From the early part of the agenda, you might have thought that they were his technical IT support, but actually they have other jobs as well. So, gentlemen, would you like to introduce the report?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm the Principal Planning Enforcement Officer. I've been here since October, and the item that was on the agenda is to update the enforcement plan that was last reviewed significantly in I think it was December 2010. So this is to bring it more up to date and with some changes to the scheme of delegation and overall constitution if it's passed by the board.
Are there any particular parts of the revised plan you'd like them to understand?
I think some of the key issues that we've put forward in this plan is one, that in order to reduce the burden on the council from anonymous complaints, which can sometimes result in there not being a breach of planning control, that's been brought forward in order to make members of the public focus their attention on what they believe to be a breach and not just to make spurious complaints that might not actually be a breach of planning control or indeed something that does not require attention from the council. But also to improve the powers of delegation to officers to expedite formal enforcement action when required. This will be similar to what you may have experienced with planning applications. So the intention is when formal action is required, we will put forward a report to the members as identified in the plan to recommend enforcement action, and subject to those members agreeing, we can then proceed and lead to serving of notices, but it gives the members the opportunity, if there's something there that they want to consider more formally, they can then bring that report to the board for the board to then have the final decision as to whether to take formal enforcement action. That's the key change to bring down the delegation to ourselves as officers with member support when to take formal action without the need to come to the board for every time formal notices are required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordan?
When you say with the members, you mean the appropriate members for that ward? Because we used to get a nice spreadsheet every month or so with all what was happening, and what have you, a nice coloured one where we knew what action was being took at what time, but we don't seem to get that anymore now.
Yes, I believe that's the case. I think it's named as it's the chair, the vice chair, the local ward members and the leader of the decision, if I recall correctly from the policy. That's who will be notified. When we're recommending to serve some form of a formal enforcement action, it will be those members that will be notified at that time. And that's when they'll be given the option, if there's something there for formal consideration, to go to board if they wanted to. Otherwise, they'll be in agreement with the officer's recommendation to proceed with formal enforcement action.
Okay, thank you.
And just picking up, Mr. Chairman, on the second point, Councillor Jordan, the paragraph 4.8 of the report indicates that we will be producing a schedule of cases for local ward members. The reason it dropped out is because the previous enforcement officer left. I need to get Ryan with his feet under the table first. We can start again, but that will be rescheduled.
Thank you.
That was very useful.
Councillor Hayfield?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is quite an encouraging report, really. I think a scheme of delegation that mirrors the planning bit, which has worked well, it's to be commended. I think it's, if it speeds up the process, makes it more efficient, and helps us to sort of get on top of some of these enforcement issues, which we know bedevils a lot of our wards and things. I think that's great. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. Your mastery of all the technical jargon is very impressive.
Well, it was that moving the recommendation I thought was the important bit, Chair.
Councillor Ryan?
Seconded.
Councillor Humphries?
I wanted to ask about gathering evidence, because there's been a couple of cases where I've been concerned, but sometimes gathering evidence gets blocked by the process. You know it's going on, locals are telling you what's going on, but you can't go on the site. Is there any way we can enforce a bit more? Mr. Brown's about to answer straight away, so I'm assuming I'm not going to win that one.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask, did you take advice from Mr. Tobin? Because there are rules and procedures about the acceptability of evidence in court, and we must abide by those rules, because the last thing the council wants is for its case to be thrown out because it hasn't done things properly in gathering evidence.
Yes, Chair, there's two situations in which evidence would need to be gathered. The first is, in most cases, planning enforcement, a breach of planning control is not a criminal offence. So if someone's built something without permission, breaking a condition, etc., that isn't generally a criminal offence in itself. If it's a listed building, certain operations are immediately a criminal offence. What then happens if you find evidence of that breach? You need to be satisfied that there's evidence which shows there's a breach, and when it's an enforcement notice, it's also expedient to issue a notice. So there's two parts to that, and the evidence that has to be gathered has to be pretty robust because it needs to stand up to the potential of an appeal of the notice. So there needs to be something which we could use to defend any such appeal. The second stage is if the notice isn't complied with, then evidence needs to be gained to the criminal standard, because obviously then it's going to be tested in court. So there are various procedural aspects, such as if surveillance was being undertaken, making sure that's properly authorised, making sure the evidence is gathered in such a way that it's admissible and can prove it to the standard beyond reasonable doubt. So this process will speed things up to the extent that members' approval won't be needed in every case, and they'll be consulted as the matter is progressed instead to see whether they have any concerns that need to be forward. But the actual evidential tests and the processes, we unfortunately can't change for our policy alone because they're set by law, and so we are bound to follow those. And as Mr. Brown said, there is the danger of the case being thrown out, and obviously that then becomes counterproductive because it can be a technical failure, if that's the right way to put it. But you might still have a breach, but if you can't prove it with admissible evidence, you've achieved nothing, and then you'll have to go back to the beginning and try again. So the process is there's very little flexibility.
Can I just come back here? Can the balance of probability lead you to be able to be more aggressive about getting beyond reasonable doubt? For example, they won't let you on the site, but you haven't got any other evidence other than anecdotal evidence from neighbours. What leads you to get onto the site?
Well, there are provisions that allow you to apply for warrants in certain circumstances to enter land to ascertain whether there's been a breach. So in appropriate cases, we can make an application to the court, but obviously you need something on the face of it to show there's a breach, because a warrant is quite intrusive. So the magistrate's court, if they're looking at whether a warrant should be granted, will want to be sure that there's pretty good grounds for going onto that property. And obviously, if it's residential premises, even more so, because obviously that's the issue of human rights comes into play, and it's Article 8, which is the right to private and family life. So we have to have fairly clear indication that something is going on, untoward. So that's our usual process. If we can't get enough information and we want to go onto the site, we need to apply for a warrant.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
I've just got a question about timelines in that when there has been historic enforcement action, and these things seem to drag on for years and years and years, when does that 4-year period start? Do we have to close enforcement action and then the 4 years starts? So if they then aren't enforced for 4 years, then that becomes legal status, or where does that? Because that's obviously great. If we've got a planning enforcement that's rolling on and on, and then people tend to kind of forget about it, and they've already reported it or they've already said it, so they might not follow it up again. I'm just a bit concerned that things might fall off the back after a number of years.
Chair, there's 2 time limits, 4 years and 10 years. I think there's more matters that are covered by the 10-year rule, but the council has from the date of the breach commencing rather than when it finds out. So that can be a bit of a tricky issue in some cases, because obviously we may find out 3 years into a breach, which has a 4-year limit. So obviously you would hope there'd be enough time within that last year that, you know, in any event, we would hope to have enough evidence to take that action. The only time when that can change has been a deliberate concealment, which is where you know, somebody has taken steps deliberately to disguise what they're doing. I think this arose following a piece of case law where a building was built on agricultural land and the farmer put basically bales of hay, just stacked them up to make it look like it was a bale of hay, with the idea of misleading the planning authority. And that led to a change in the law that allows us to apply for an order, but which we have to evidence the fact that it deliberately concealed it, but then that can effectively extend time to allow us to do so. So it's unfortunately from the time of the breach commencing rather than when we find out.
If we've already started enforcement action and that behaviour is to either carry on, or if we stop that behaviour and then it carries on without reporting,
Well, if you've started your action in that time, within that time limit, then you're fine.
Yeah, that's it.
So you know, with an enforcement notice, they saying as they run with the land, so that if once you've got that notice in place, if somebody says it's out of use, someone can stop now and they can start again in 6 months or a year's time. But if that notice remains in place, then it's tied to the land.
Brilliant, thank you.
Members, any other questions? There's only one thing I'd like to, and we did previously with the officers talk about training, particularly as regards the new scheme. Now clearly, councillors' careers may be interrupted by an event that's going to happen. So what we talked about was having some training on the new scheme of delegation after the election, if you're all content with that. I think training is important, particularly talking about how the law affects the rules and what the rules are. But I think given that, you know, May is imminent, we should aim to do this in 5 those who are still left. And we're all happy with that. Yeah. So can I see? Sorry, there was a proposer.
There was.
And a seconder. All those in favour of adoption? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. We now move to application number 4, which is a consultation for the Hartshill sewage works. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's run through the slides. I don't know if you're familiar with Hartshill sewage works, but most members probably are. Udston, Hartshill, the West Coast Main Line runs through here, and it's just by the side of where the bridge is, the railway bridge over the junction with Udston Road up to Hartshill. It's here on the Ordnance Survey map, a little bit more detail here on the north side of the A5, up the railway line. 6 kiosks, all appear to run the same as shown there on the plan. And then the location, there are 3 here, which is close to Woodford Lane, and 3 down here within the main bulk of the site. As you can see, the purpose of them is to increase the efficiency and efficacy of the outflow from the works, and therefore I would have no objection to those being within the context of the very large treatment works as it is, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any comments?
Can I just, I haven't got any problem with it, but the word kiosk is really strange in this context. But is it something technical that just clears the sewage or something?
It's a cabinet.
It's a cabinet. Okay. I'll take your word for it.
So if there are no other comments, questions, I'll move it from the chair. Seconded. All those in favour of the consultation response? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. We now have another consultation for land at the corner of Melville Lane, Alderstone. Mr. Brown, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman, just to go through the slide. There's only one slide, and that's to show you where the location is. It's the top end of Merivale Lane. with the common here, which goes into Barnsley. The Jaguar Land Rover site is on the other side of the road. It's the former heap that was here, the spoil heap that was here, and which is still actually seen as you see around the perimeter of the site. I had to send an extra email around to members during last week because there was some confusion between that I had and certainly county officers had on the actual proposal that was in front of or contained in the application. The condition, the original condition, which was attached to the Planning Commission here, is very complicated. Apart from looking at hours for weekdays, Saturdays, Sundays, and certain named days, named bank holidays, there are also hours for the movement of empty vehicles and full vehicles. And when you put that combination together, Mr. Chairman, the wording of a condition is somewhat difficult to interpret. The county officers and myself had the interpretation that was put in front of you in terms of the written report. We've gone back to the county officer has gone back to the applicant, and I sent an email around during last week to explain that the proposal in fact is to have empty vehicles leaving the site on all weekdays and Saturdays between 0600 and 0700 in the mornings. It's not just for the named days. It's far wider than that. Just to add, Mr. Chairman, for those members that are aware of the site and have been involved with the Jaguar Land Rover proposal, this route from Merivale Lane down to the A5 is used by the car transporters to deliver cars to the JLR site. There are no hours restrictions on that site. So there could be half a dozen JLR transporters going up and down Merivale Lane at this time of the morning in any event. So therefore, that's the reason why this may not be material if, as the applicant indicates, the number of vehicles will only be 2 or 3. In that situation, Mr. Chairman, the advice of the Environmental Health Officer is significant, and the County Council has separately, as they do, separately consulted our environmental health officers. So the recommendation the first time round was that the County Council be informed there's no objection, subject to the agreement of the Council's Environmental Health Officer. And I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, in light of the updated information, that remains the same. And the Environmental Health Officer will comment on the wider implications of the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Before, I'd just like to clarify, the title of the application refers to between 6 and 7, and the report itself refers to 6 and 8, so presumably between 6 and 8.
That's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, we sought clarification. The actual header says between 6 and 7, so it is between 6 and 7 on weekdays and Saturdays.
So it's only 6 till 7?
It's only 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, yeah.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. So the vehicles are actually coming out onto Merivale Lane. They're not coming out onto the common, which is the road that leads to Barnsley ends.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. They all come onto Merivale Lane, both in and out.
Thank you. And then down to the A5.
Thank
you.
Any other questions, members? Can I see a proposal? There's no objection. Moved and seconded. So we'll happy all those in favour of no objection. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item is planning application number 206 for 81 Main Road, Orstry. Mr. Brandt?
I'll just run through the slides again, Mr. Chairman. As you can see from the report, this proposal was changed during the course of the application. It was originally for 2 houses. It's now coming for 1. As you can see there on the slide on the left, it's at the junction of Main Road here and Wharton Lane in the centre of Orstry. It's a vacant plot within a frontage. It's inside the development boundary, and as you can see here, 1 house is proposed between number 53 and 81. Parking spaces in the front. There's sufficient on there, certainly for 2, with gardens, private amenity land at the back. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, the Highway Authority had no objection, and there's no objections either coming through from other consultees. From our point of view, Mr. Chairman, it's a development with inside the development boundary that puts in with the frontage.
Members?
Yeah, all I'll say, the applicant's lived there all his life. Father lives next door, and it's about just reinforcing the family position in the village. As far as I'm concerned, I have no problem with it. I would like to move it.
Thank you.
Second.
Any other comments on this? In which case it's been proposed and seconded for approval. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We dealt with the application at Chapel End, so we move to application number 228 for land at Durno's Nurseries, Old Holly Lane, Atherton. Mr. Max Whitehouse has, Mr. Max Whitehead has indicated Max speak. You take the speaker's chair while Mr. Brown introduces his report.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see from the introduction, the application is being reported because of the unilateral undertaking, which deals with a traffic regulation order, which is referred to in the report. The application itself is for the variation of the Planning Commission and Outline Planning Commission was granted some time ago now. And the applicant is seeking variation of two things. First of all, the layout, which was agreed some time ago, and also the house types. And the reasons for those variations are set out in the report, as you can see. And I've also indicated there the background to the particular case. We've received objections as outlined in the report from residents in Panama Drive. Just referring to the slide, Mr. Chairman, the application site is outlined in red. Former Durno Nursery site off Old Holly Lane, which is here. Rowlands Avenue here, and the oldie site is down here. Panama Drive is the residential development you can see here, and the objections have come from, particularly from people at this end of the road, and those objections are referred to in the report. If I can just run through the slides, Mr. Chairman, that's the layout as approved. And in fact, the report refers to some single-storey dwellings, which are the ones down here, which are now proposed to be removed. In terms of the proposed layout, that's in front of you, as you can see there. And then in terms of the change at the bottom end of the site, these were the bungalows which were on the original approval, and then we replaced with two-storey houses, as you can see here. The plans which are replicated in your papers in the agenda show the separation distances between the two. And as you can see from there, and as reported in my report, those meet our current council guidance. Additionally, those separation distances match the distances which were approved further up the road on the original application. So this situation down here would be no different to that which has already been approved. And then in terms of house types, as I say, the house types which were originally approved are longer within the portfolio of Bloor Homes. But you can see here the current range of house types that is now being accommodated, will be now accommodated on the site. And members that have been involved in various applications and pre-application discussions with various applicants and developers will know how these particular design and appearances have been arrived at in those discussions that we've had. There's nothing here, Mr. Chairman, that would concern me in terms of design that would match what we've been seeking for in other applications.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just out of interest, did you consult the design champions on the revised house types?
No, I haven't, Mr. Chairman, because they match very much the outline which those design champions are sought to introduce on other sites.
Thank you. Mr. Whitehead, welcome to the Council House and welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin will explain the rules for public engagement. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. As you saw with the other applicants, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. When your time begins, I'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining, and then if you're still speaking at the end, I'll let you know when the time is up. Okay. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much. I think some of the members here today will recall resolving to grant planning permission on the Durno's Nursery site back in 2016, after which there were protracted negotiations to agree the 106 and acquire the land. However, I'm pleased to say now that we are full and now owners of the site. We've undertaken site clearance and demolition under the approved scheme and are now primed and ready to deliver the homes on this site. As set out by your officer, the passage of time has meant that amendments to the approved scheme are necessary, hence the application before you today. Firstly, the design of the estate roads and footpaths have had to be altered to comply with the County Council's latest adoption standards. This has led to some changes to the overall road pattern and housing layout, altering the relationship between new and existing homes on Panama Drive. I'm aware that as a result of this, concerns have been raised by some of the residents on Panama Drive because of the situation with the bungalows being relocated elsewhere in the site. I think in response to this, in addition to the points that have been set out in the officer's report about the back-to-back distances, our houses are to the north of those on Panama Drive, so you're not going to get any sort of overshadowing impacts. Going back to the revised layout, I would like to also confirm that the urban design principles discussed with and agreed with regard to the approved scheme have been carried over to the new scheme. Primarily, this ensures that the main street through the site has a distinct character with the use of estate railings and newly planted street trees. The existing mature cypress trees are to be retained in pockets of focal open space. The proposed development will therefore set a suitable benchmark in urban design quality for the remainder of the Holly Lane allocation. I think there are a couple of other benefits I'd like to highlight with regard to the scheme that's before you today. Firstly, the new house type range, since it was introduced about 5 years ago, has helped Law to achieve a very high level of build quality.
1 minute remaining.
Okay. Enabling us to maintain our 5-star HBF status. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, the homes we're asking you to approve today will all be built to the 2023 Enhanced Building Regulation standards. These standards will result in homes that are nearly 30% better than those previously required, through the use of air source heat pumps, uprated insulation and energy efficient appliances. Also delivering these houses will give us 44 much needed affordable homes and over £1.2 million of financial contributions via the Section 106 agreement, of which over £500,000 will be spent on open space and leisure projects in the open area. There are therefore some notable benefits to these redevelopment proposals, and I hope you are able to approve them today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Just one from me, slightly tongue in cheek, but Secretary of State requires us to build beautiful. Do you consider your houses will be beautiful?
We do actually, yes. Yeah, we've actually done a lot of work recently on increasing and improving the standard of our houses, how they look architecturally, as well as simplifying the build quality. We are more focused on materials and design details. Hopefully you can see from those houses there. And I think we as a company also take quite a lot of pride in the street scene and the development's been presented well. You know, I'm trying to think of where the closest scheme is to this one, possibly Blythe Valley in Solihull, but members can rest assured this will be as good as all of our other developments.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, you've just been saying how beautiful your houses are going to be. But if we're talking about beautiful homes, we're talking about beautiful estates.
Yes.
As well. I note that in Appendix B here, which is the scheme that has already received approval.
Yeah.
That there are some very large trees that are being retained right in the middle of the site, which break up that estate and actually improve the visual aspect of it from within and out from the estate. And it also sort of brings a link through between the two parts of it. In your latest suggestion of a plan, that has completely disappeared. I wonder why you've got rid of those mature trees. Why it is impossible to keep them.
Well, yes. The trees, obviously, it was a heavily treed site.
I accept that a lot of the trees have got to go, but
yeah, I mean, a lot of them were sort of shelter belt kind of trees, a little bit of plantation, and then a lot of the ones that were removed on the southern boundary were poplar trees, which aren't particularly compatible with new housing because they're structurally not particularly sound, quite tall, can cause lots of overshadowing. On the approved scheme, I think there were probably 3 or 4 pockets of trees that were retained, possibly 5.
It's the one particularly, if Mr. Brown could find Appendix B, right in the middle of it, there is a cluster of trees.
My eyesight's not that good.
It's
This one here, councillor.
that one there.
That.
But there is a break in the line of houses with a clump of mature trees, and from memory, I do not believe they are poplars, but I think that they are of good big amenity value within that development. The progressed, and I just find it difficult to stand that up against the next appendix, the next view, which actually just removes those completely.
Yeah, we did have another look at those trees. Obviously, the tree survey done for the original scheme were sort of 10 years old nearly. The trees that we obviously taken off this scheme, they weren't that great. I can't remember precisely that. I haven't got the information in front of me what they were. We have been careful with there's 2 cypress trees. One's a redwood, I think. One's something else that's quite unusual that were sort of specimens that the owners, the Durnos, brought over. They're the ones we have retained, plus some on the sort of north western frontage there. You know, taking off trees off sites is not something, believe it or not, it's not something we do lightly because they can add maturity and sales value to schemes.
There is that, and they also provide that area there provides a pedestrian access towards the town. It doesn't exist elsewhere. It does provide a link through.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be a link through at the eastern end where the balancing pond is. There's a footpath in the Red Rose Panama Drive scheme there. There'd be a link through there. That would be the most direct one to get through into town. I can't remember whether there was a pedestrian link on that original scheme, if I'm honest with you. It's not unfortunate on the plan I've got here. But we would have had to have had an agreement with Red Road to deliver that one. I'm not quite sure what happened. I mean, we have got an agreement with them to deliver the one at the bottom end. That's your direct route into the town centre.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? In which case, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Members, any comments? Proposals? Councillor Humphries?
I think what it needs to be, go ahead as it, I'll have to read it again now.
So you're proposing the recommendation?
Yes.
While he's reading it, I'll second it.
Thank you very much. So it's been proposed and seconded?
I will just leave my on the table over it.
Thank you. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Mr. Brown's input about condition 12, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that is being 106 throughout the estate? Is that a policy now for county council that all new estates will be subject to a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit? Because I'd be really interested to know what £3,000 buys, because my recollection of the highways grant is that will buy a couple of sites, which in truth will have no impact on the speed whatsoever.
The county council, Mr. Chairman, is increasingly asking for 20-mile speed limits throughout estates. I think it's within their new highway design specification. So they will be looking at it. Certainly be looking at it here in the remainder of this estate as we go through the various phases on this part of Atherstone. So that's not unusual now to see that. The figure of 3,000 has been requested by the county, so I can't account for that figure. It would, I suspect, it's solely to do with the legal process of actually, Councillor Bell's nodding, the legal process of actually involved in making the order. It's not the physical infrastructure, which I presume the county or the developer would actually end up paying for.
I mean, I quite wholly support anything to do with road safety and reducing vehicle speeds. I mean, I'd not just put it in this application, but maybe, Chair, we could have a conversation about it outside the meeting at a later date, just about how we could ensure or support County Council Highways colleagues around enforcement and around built interventions that ensured people kept to 20 as opposed to signs that say 20.
Yes, absolutely. In which case, members, it's been proposed and seconded for approval. I think, Councillor Ryan, if you're happy, we'll take that as outside the application, but we'll follow up on a Friday.
Sure.
Those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, I think I'd like some more details on what the 106 agreement says. So if we could follow up on the 106 agreement and Councillor Riley's comments at a further meeting.
Could I add to that, Chair? Because I know they're talking about building down towards the river behind Aldi as well, and all that together was going to be about £4 million of 106, which would have been improvements on the bridge and the pedestrian bridge coming up from TNT, which would have made that road safer. And this 1.2 million and £500,000 going to go to green spaces. I don't know what that one, whatever's left, is going to be spent on. But obviously, once again, that road's still going to stay. And you've been on it yourself, articulated lorries cannot make that bend round that bridge without one of them giving way, because they have to cross the essential line of the road. That needs to be done. If we're not going to do Hollybank, then I think the council should be, and I will go back as a member for the county to ask them to do something about it, because it's not going away. But I'd be interested to see where the money's going. Thank you.
So perhaps, Mr. Brown, you can circulate that to all members. We'll now move on to application number 386 for the Polesworth Working Men's Club High Street Polesworth, which you remember members have been before you previously. We have a speaker, Mr. Andrew Upson. Mr. Upson, if you take the speaker's chair while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to run through the slides first, members are now familiar with the site on the north side of High Street in Polesworth, as you can see there. The existing elevations, I know it's not very clear on the slides, but you have paper copies of those, the existing elevations and the existing internal arrangements. At the bottom there, the proposed elevations, which are basically a refurbishment of the four elevations, and the new plan which has come in. Show the bedroom accommodation following our discussion at the last meeting. Just to bring you up to date, Mr. Chairman, there was a site visit on Saturday morning. I've circulated a note of that visit on the tables in front of members. For those members that were not present on the site visit, let me just indicate that we looked at the general setting of the site, identifying the heritage assets, as you can see, which are Abbey Gate over here, the Spread Eagle Pub, and Nethersole School at the bottom end down here. We had a good look at the existing elevations and compared them with those that were proposed. We also looked at disabled access arrangements, and we walked around the site to the rear so we could see the access gates that would facilitate private access to some of the rears of the properties here in Coronation Road. And then we actually went inside the building as well and had a good look at the two function rooms that there, one of which is proposed to be removed. So therefore, it's quite an intensive site visit, Mr. Chairman, and quite involved. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, things have happened since the last report. We've got that amended planning coming in, indicating the type of bedroom accommodation, and showing that, and secondly, with the disabled access and disabled bedroom accommodation shown on those plans. And secondly, the applicant organised a couple of drop-in sessions for local consultation purposes, and the applicant has provided you a note of those events. That's attached as one of the appendices to the report. As a consequence of that, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation does not alter from previous time. It's still one of approval, and the planning reasons for that are set out in the report. But what I am saying is clearly there needs to be a substitution of the plan number to reflect the new plan. And also, one of the major issues that cropped up last time and was discussed not only at the site visit but at drop-in sessions was the booking system and how the management of the bed and breakfast accommodation is to be provided. And I'm recommending a pre-commencement condition number 2 there, which is similar to what we've had elsewhere in the borough with arrangements such as this. It's for a management plan to look at the booking arrangements and have those to be approved before work is commenced. And then a second recommendation, Mr. Chairman, clearly this has generated a lot of public interest, and the board has, in similar circumstances, recommended that a small liaison group is set up, whereby the applicant can meet local residents to discuss concerns if they arise, and that group can have representatives of the board, usually local members, on that particular group. So that's the second recommendation. I've got nothing further to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Upson, welcome to the meeting. As you'll be aware, Mr. Tobin will now explain the rules for public engagement. Mr. Tobin.
Evening. I'm sure you're familiar with the rules, but I'll repeat them in any event. You'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll let you know when your time begins. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll let you know when the time begins.
Okay.
Your 3 minutes starts now.
Right, just checking this is on. Right, everybody hear me? No?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Andrew Upson. I'm the architectural designer for the project, and I'm here with Karen Stevens, who's the director of Westbourne Leisure. Mr. Brown has basically underlined and outlined all of the things I was going to point out here today. But since the last time this was presented to the committee, there was a certain amount of confusion regarding the number of rooms, the type of room, single or double, and the level of clientele for which the proposal was intended. There were fears from local residents that the new rooms would be used to house immigrants and homeless. And whilst both of those categories are worthwhile, it's been demonstrated that the desired customer base is completely at the other end of the scale. Since that meeting, myself and Karen have met with councillors and discussed the scheme at length, provided a definitive plan showing all of the rooms as either twin or double, and clearly identified the disabled facilities, including the disabled room. In addition, Karen, as Mr. Brown has pointed out, has had 2 meetings on site with local residents and presented to them in some detail the style and quality of the proposals, together with the type of clientele they are intending to cater for. Some were reluctant to accept the change, and some welcomed the development as an improvement to the existing facilities. And throughout all of these meetings, it's been emphasised that without this level of investment, the existing premises, which provide a vital service for the community, is in real financial jeopardy. And I would therefore ask you to accept the recommendations of the planning officers and grant the approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Not sure. We'll come to Parsons and Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that did crop up at the consultation was a suggestion of that you were applying for a C2 application for accommodation, possibly for health needs and nothing to. I don't see that in the plans, and is it the case that you are simply applying for a C1 classification?
My understanding is that C1 covers hotels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think you'll find on the plan, I inadvertently put C1 and C2.
Yes, that was spotted.
In fact, it should have been C1.
Yeah, and that's where we are.
But it's covered on the section for C1.
Great, thank you for that. That's good. And I mean, there were obviously some concerns expressed, but assurances were given that you are not seeking long-term occupancy, and is that the case? That, can you state that you're looking at short-term lettings rather than long-term occupancy?
Absolutely correct. I think Karen would underline the fact that the kind of term of stay at these premises is exactly the same as that with a Premier Inn or with a Holiday Inn or those kind of operations. Exactly the same.
Thank you for that. And then one very last brief question: the residents who have access through your current gate, which leads through the high vehicles. They have an access from Neversole Street, but they can't get their higher vehicles through. And they are concerned that that access will continue to be available to them. And is that your plan?
I don't think we have a choice there. There's a right of way that goes through to there, and we have to maintain that accessible at all times.
That's it. But they did. I don't know whether they do ask whether you'd be willing to put that in routine. But
looking at the gates themselves, they look very overgrown. I don't think they've been used for a long
but they
time.
are used.
But I would suspect we'll clear that out when the works are done.
Great. But there is no intention to block that.
No, not at all. It's indicated on the plan as a right of way. So,
thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Hi. At the last meeting, obviously, we had 25 rooms, I believe, that were single rooms. I know there's been an updated plan. They're still the same. My question is, there's still the same amount of rooms, but now there's doubles. So I gather the sizes haven't changed. We've just changed the plan by taking double beds out and replacing them with double beds.
Yeah, well, in fact, they were always doubles.
Okay.
It's just that there was never any indication on the plan whether they were single or double.
Right.
But the plan that's now been supplied, the definitive plan, quite clearly shows all of them as either twin rooms or double rooms.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
And just a question from me, because I wasn't here at the original meeting, and apologies if you addressed it now. What are the highway impacts from your current proposal instead of the existing use? Do you anticipate there'll be more vehicle movements to and from the site, the less or the same?
The plan shows quite clearly that the parking arrangements have been indicated to a greater extent than they are at the moment. In fact, it's very difficult at the moment to see where the parking bays are. I suppose you could anticipate that there would be additional parking, but there is sufficient parking to cope with it.
So I was meaning more vehicles going to and from the site rather than those parking bays.
To and from the site. We did some tracking, I think, on the plan to show that the access in and out for vehicles through the back of the building as well was it's perfectly acceptable.
But can you tell me how many?
How many vehicles?
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
I think in the documents it does say 37. Yeah.
37 spaces.
Yes, but not vehicle movement. Oh, right. Sorry. Yes.
No, I'd seen the 37 spaces.
Right. It was, yes.
Movement. So
one question I forgot to ask, if I may, because I cannot remember. Yeah, we did notice on the site visits that there are houses, particularly at the rear of the premises, bordering on that. And there was a concern expressed that lighting the car park should be discreet and low level, so as not to give light pollution to the houses around. Is that something that could come into the plans?
Absolutely. I mean, you could make that a condition. I mean, yeah. It would be in our interest not to have lighting that's polluting neighbouring properties. Yeah.
I think that would be a useful condition if we could do it, Chair.
Any questions, members? In which case, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, over to you. Who'd like to begin the discussion? I feel like a tennis umpire, over one of you to the other. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. I know I've spoken rather a lot, so I'll try and be brief. Clearly, this building is in desperate need of investment. I think those of us who went there could see that very clearly. And there is undeniably some concern in the community, and that concern won't immediately go away. It needs to be considered, looked at, and thought about. We are getting assurances, and there have been improvements to the plan. Still a difficult one for those of us who represent the community, because it is controversial. But the building does need investment, and this does need looking at. There is certainly a small group, but a dedicated group who want their club facility, the bar, retained, and this is probably the one way it can be. And those views are all expressed and summed up in the document you have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure I saw first. I think it was Councillor Gordon.
Second. I think I have some concerns about the highways issues that you've already expressed. Obviously, to maintain the asset is really important, and if this makes the asset more feasible to be maintained, but it is also taken away from the asset as it is, because there will only be one function room instead of the two. And I'm not quite sure that the balance is right, and I think that maybe 25 rooms and the additional parking in such a tight and closed space is going to put too much pressure on the local amenities, and I've got some concerns about that balance, whether we might have gone over too far in order to protect the asset. We might have gone too far over. I like the reassurances that it is going to be short-term stays. Obviously, that allays people's concerns, but there's no, at the moment, I can't see anything which can tie that for the long term. I don't think that's a future-proofed guarantee. And I think that as with all of these things, once the permission's been granted, then that's in place. And I don't think that it's tied to those short-term stays. And I think those concerns are valid as a change of use for the building. And I think I'd like to see some more reassurances and possibly a limitation on the local amenity of the visits per day and the number of rooms that are being rented on a regular basis. So my understanding is from Premier Inns and things like that, it tends to be 1 or 2 days. So you've got new cars coming and new cars leaving almost constantly. So yeah, I've still got significant concerns with the reassurances that we've been given.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, we've been through this, and again, I would like to thank Westbourne Leisure and Karen for doing the consultations. It was a good event. There are still concerns from the residents, and there is still concerns from me. I understand that the club needs investment, and I welcome any investment into any establishment within the area. However, going through this report, there is a lot for me that keeps saying might have an impact, may well have an impact, but it's outweighed. For me, the residents and the councillors or whatever need to understand what is an outweighed benefit or impact on Polesworth. This is opposite the Abbey. This is in a conservation area. This is a very important place for anybody from Polesworth. So to say there may be an impact on that area, I can't see anything that you could sell to Polesworth that would be outweighed that kind of impact on that area, as it's that important. I've gone through again the whole report, and again I do welcome the updated report, the plans. But as we look at the heritage impacts of this, it goes on to say about historic, architectural, community evolution. It might not well be seen as compatible with the later characteristics. We highlight in this report consistently that there are concerns and impact on Polesworth and the heritage, the historical factors, and including the highway in some cases. Anybody who knows that road, and if you were on the site visit, you would see the parking on the other side opposite the chip shop, the spread, and the Abbey, and it goes all the way up that road. Adding more cars onto the high street would need more management than managing the car park, I would argue. I'm not saying I'm against the refurbishment or the plans, but I do think there's more work to do here. Before the residents' voices need to be heard, and I think it's important that they're happy, that we're happy, that we've got the best options on the table before we approve anything. So I would recommend deferment for more conversations, to have confirmation on how we can protect the heritage, understand the traffic, and again, protect the historical and the amenities within Polesworth.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd second that proposal for a deferment to understand the heritage impact. You know, we're talking about a conservation area. We're talking about buildings which are part of North Warwickshire Crown Jewels in terms of heritage assets. And I suppose as I sit here tonight, Chair, I don't fully understand what impact there will be on those. I've read the board report, but it doesn't satisfy my concerns. So I would second the proposal for a deferment just to enable the board to better understand what impact there would be on our heritage assets from effectively having a huge number of people moving in next door and coming in and going.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? I'll just say I was entirely intending to attend the site visit on Saturday. Unfortunately, events prevented me from getting all the way there. It wasn't disinterest, it was simply an accident on the road. Any other questions or comments? So we've had a proposal that the matter be deferred for further information, and if you bear with me, I think after the meeting we should collate a detailed list of the areas to discuss, so that we, given that the item's been deferred once, it's fair to the applicant that we clarify exactly where we need additional information. Is there anything else anyone would wish to say before we take a vote on deferment? In which case, I've had a proposal and a second to further defer the application's determination for the reasons cited. Can I see those in favour of deferral? And those against? That's carried.
And I abstain.
I noticed. So that application is deferred. We will endeavour to bring it back to the next meeting following the further conversations we have with the applicants. Members, we move on to agenda item number 7, which is a tree preservation order on land at the Wheatheath Inn Station Road, Felton. Anything to add, Jude?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's just to confirm an order.
I'll approve the recommendation, Chair.
Second.
All those in favour? Thank you. No abstentions. The next item is another tree preservation order at the Dog in Marsh Lane, Walthorton. Anything to add, Mr. Brown?
Again, Mr. Chairman, nothing to add.
Move the recommendation.
I say all off the shelf. Councillor Riley.
Chair, speaking with the local member, I'm perplexed by this TPA. I know that we've had a temporary TPA, but I've read the officer's report, but I really cannot understand the value of this tree to the local amenity. The tree is causing huge problems to the footpath, where it's ripping the footpath, but the tree is in the garden of a public house where goodness knows they are struggling commercially enough as it is. And being a eucalyptus, it drops its leaves all over the place and is incredibly rapid growing species. So knowing this tree well and knowing the problems it causes, I really don't understand why it needs a TPA, because I don't see there is anything significant about it, either through its species or any value it adds to Walthorton. Indeed, this tree will be in the conservation area, hopefully, once we review their locations, and actually what the area needs is forgotten the word now, UK species, native species, there you go, not foreign weeds. So, Chair, I'd request that we could revisit the tree officer and just properly understand why he feels that this tree is of such significant value, because it doesn't match local perceptions. And even though I place great weight on ecology and offsetting, it doesn't feel to me as though it adds up anything at all.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Mr. Brown, if you could answer that, but with a question from me as well. In section 3.2, you sought representations from neighbours and the parish council. You had one objection. So was that from the parish council or from an interested neighbour?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's from the owner of the land.
Thank you. So there were no other objections?
No.
So to Councillor Riley's question?
The only reason why you can place an order on a tree is in the interest of public amenity. So that is the question that you have to answer. Whether it's causing damage is not an issue with an order. You can make the order, and an applicant or the landowner can actually submit an application to have works done to the tree. Doesn't prevent works being done to the tree. It doesn't, in fact, at the end of the day, it doesn't prohibit the felling of the tree, provided the evidence is there. If Councillor Riley is saying there are issues, then first of all, those issues should be dealt with as through the proper maintenance of the tree by the landowner, as in any event, as any landowner should do, to reduce the risk. That's what they would normally be expected to do. But if the applicant or the owner considers that in fact work should be done to the tree, an order will not prevent an application being submitted and determined. If at the end of the day he wants to fell the tree, he can still submit an application to do that, provided that he has the evidence to show that there is causing a structural problem, either to the pavement or to the grounds of the house. So the placement of an order does not prohibit some of the issues that Councillor Riley is referring to.
Councillor Humphrey?
Chair, am I right in thinking that once the boundary of the conservation area grows and absorbs this tree, it ends up in a protected area anyway, and there's an element of protection to that tree before any works could be done to it?
As soon as the conservation area is adopted, and if the extension includes this site, then the tree will be protected, yes. Yeah. But there is a gap, obviously, between now and when that might happen.
Okay.
Do we have any other protected eucalypti, Mr. Brown, that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of offhand.
And on page 127 of 139, there's a reference I don't understand. I'm sorry, I should have asked before. W3W vast dairy couple. What does that mean? Other than the obvious.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
That's what three words that is.
I would have to. It's
the location.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's it.
You should take what three words when you go on that cruise. We might find out where you've gone.
Yeah, this isn't a perfect comment, I'm sure, but what an unfortunate 3 words to have chosen.
So a lot more than
that. I've learned as well. Councillor Riley, any other comments?
I understand everything Mr. Brown advises on, but like I say, I'm just absolutely perplexed that this tree is considered to be of such significant value. It is alarming, isn't it, that none of the residents who consistently complain about it have raised any objection, and that's probably because I wasn't on the case. I don't for one moment think that valuable species should not be protected, but I just don't consider this to be a valuable species.
It's the only one by the sound of it.
Yeah, it's not the only one in Florida.
It's also very, very visible.
Sorry, no.
It is very, very visible.
It is horrendous. It's awful.
Well, Councillor Godfrey?
Yes. Trees tend to be large and they're mature.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, sorry if I'm out. We spent a significant amount of money planting cherry trees along Marsh Lane. And I'm really grateful to County Council Highways for the investment and the time. This goes against everything that those trees try and create. They look fabulous now with the bud coming out of this thing. It's like a weed.
Councillor Riley, I'm shocked. You spent an inordinate amount of time on a previous application saying that cherry trees should be taken down in Allenstein.
I didn't.
I think one of the nice things about Warwickshire is the diversity of its arboriculture.
I think one of the charming things about North Warwickshire is that I called Councillor Gosling to speak, and you two have both butted in front of her. Councillor Gosling.
Thank you. I'm now intrigued as to whether or not they were native cherry trees, but I will leave. But I just wanted to comment on the tempo assessment, and it's obviously, for whatever personal feelings we've got towards this tree, it has scored highly, and even, I was going to say alien species, even non-native species do provide important habitats. We've got sycamores which are now being used to replace ash, as we're coping with ash dieback, and some of these non-native trees, whereas I agree that the native species and protecting the existing habitats are important. That they do fill niches, and if it's scored so highly on the Tempo scores, then we can only assume that this tree is filling some sort of habitat niche, despite the personal feeling against it. And I do understand that there are other challenges with it, but the assessments we've got in front of us say that there is a value to it. And if we're being told by local members that there is no value to it, then there's a contradiction between the report we've got in front of us and the experiences of residents.
I'm in your hands, Simon.
We've got a proposal and a second then.
Are there any other alternative proposals?
I'd like to deferment to be able to speak to the tree officer to find out why he considers it such a valuable specimen, because we've seen TPA before and very rarely are they ranked this highly. So as long as you get a personal visit and you can explain it, fine. I'd be more concerned if you looked at Google Earth.
Point of clarification here, do we have time to wait for that before this DPO runs out? Because we really should move on this, I think.
Mr. Brown, I'll come back to you, Councillor.
In effect, Mr. Chairman's answers Councillor Turvey's situation. The temporary order only applies to 6 months. It was made on the 22nd of August. That's the reason why this application is before you. This report is before you. This board. If it goes to the April board, the order will have lapsed.
Pace, Councillor. Councillor. Councillor Hackett.
Obviously, when we're all elected, we hope that these kind of things come up to talk about. But on a serious note, I will second Councillor Riley's deferment, as he's the local member of the ward. But can we delegate then to somebody so we don't miss the deadline if we can get this all sorted?
I think we've missed it already, haven't we, Councillor? Mr. Brown?
Well, 6 months from the 22nd of August.
Expired. It's expired. Can we knock it down on the second?
Oh, the query, sorry, I beg your pardon. The query was on the 22nd. I'm reading from the report.
Change that, don't they?
It's about timing, isn't it? You get the chance.
Just say I slipped.
I think we confirmed the emergency order on the 7th of September. So was it from the date it was imposed?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Tempo was done on the 1st of September.
Yeah, so it's run
The
out.
date it was made.
But what's the date today?
7th of March.
Runs out tomorrow, doesn't it?
Tomorrow. Thanks for your time.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, busy lad. He'll be fine.
It'll be safe until next week.
I propose that we confirm the order, because then it can still be cut down if that is necessary, but it protects it if that is the decision.
So, members, I have two proposals. The first for confirmation of the order, the second for a deferral. We'll take deferral first, because if that falls, then it's logical to go on to confirmation of the order. So, those in favour of deferment, please show. Three. Those against deferment. 8. On that basis, deferral falls, and I see those in favour of confirmation of the order. 8. Those against. 1.5 or 2, I'm not sure. So, in any event, it's carried and the order was confirmed. Agenda item number 9 is, thank you very much. I need to go into the conversation, and for once, a split vote. I was beginning to think we were going to have another meeting, but it was unanimous all the way through, which is pleasant in itself. Agenda item number 9, an appeal update from Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This matter was referred to informally at the last meeting. Just reporting the outcome from the planning appeal in Osprey. I've included the full letter there. Members have discussed this already.
Thank you. Any other appeal decisions you may wish to draw to our attention whilst we're here?
whilst you're here, Mr. Chairman, an appeal decision, I think, came out last week, anyway, certainly after the publication of this report, to do with the proposed one house at Hill House in Witherley Road, Atherstone, where we had the site visit last autumn, I think it was. The decision came out, planning commission has been granted, so there's an outline planning commission has been granted for one house there. The appeal has been allowed, and also a partial award of costs has been made against the council because the council's refusal on amenity had not been evidenced, and therefore the inspector felt that we acted unreasonably in that respect.
And is there any guidance, Mr. Brown, on how members speaking at a meeting could gain sufficient evidence other than on their own sort of understanding of their ward?
Basically, Mr. Chairman, I think what's being suggested here was to do a study on daylighting and sunlighting, and using that particular methods that were involved in some of those calculations, which in fact we did use in Wharton on one particular application, where we had an application for the hills, where we looked at sunlighting and shadowing impacts. There has to be a full technical appraisal done. If that had been done and showed to the council satisfactorily that there was going to be an issue, then that would be weighty evidence. We didn't go through that process.
So, members, I think next time you're looking at a refusal, and I admit most of the time I think it's close to the meeting date by the time you've seen the report and what have you. If you are minded to move a refusal proposal, might be simpler to move a deferment to allow the office to have evidence. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Yes, along those lines, Chairman, I am now concerned about the Willow Close application because they're quite likely to appeal, and we are relying on amenity quite heavily in terms of our refusal there. So my question is there any work we should be doing to prove that the loss of amenity in that particular case?
I think we're very strong on this one, Mr. Chairman. There's the public sector equality duty, apart from anything else, which I said adds serious weight to the residential amenity application. The fact that this in fact is an estate which is wholly of elderly persons, wholly within the management of the council, and where there is a valued site, as we heard, not only from the residents, but we know from a housing point of view, it's a valued site and there's a waiting list. I'm sure the residents, if they're asked, could provide general information on medical conditions. Obviously, from a privacy point of view, we can't ask for individuals' comments, but some sort of general comment on the medical condition of some of the residents there would be helpful. And also a number of times, as the speaker said, an ambulance turns up. Yeah. And that kind of evidence would certainly add weight to the reason for refusal.
Chair, I actually think I'm not a Bellway fan as it happens, but I would say what happened in and around the hills and on the Bellway estate, the pre-app meetings that took place, and the meetings that we managed to organise with the neighbours, and then the change of 2 properties to bungalows and a reorientation of some garages changed the impressiveness of that site onto the people that live in that area. So when it comes to developments, I would hope that we could continue with pre-app meetings if there's going to be anything contentious, and sort of cut it off at the pass before it happens. In that case, it happened, and I think it was a good idea, and I think we should encourage that if it's possible.
Thank you. So, members, are you happy to note the appeal update?
Great.
In which case, I now move agenda item number 10 that the public can first be excluded from the remaining part of the meeting. Those in favour? Thank you very much.